we will continue with our discussion on fallacies. Last week we had some discussion on fallacies, particularly we had a discussion on what we call fallacies of relevance. And then also we need to discuss fallacies of ambiguity. But again, before going into it, let me have a look at again what we have been discussing, because in academic and scholarly writing, to the extent that we give arguments to prove what we say, it is very important for us to think about, know about fallacies. Because in the academic writing, main thing is to produce arguments to prove what you say. Okay? Now, if you do not have argument to prove what you say, then that becomes only a description. Now, in the newspapers, what you find is, accounts, descriptions, right? But then in any other writing, particularly academic writing, we try to prove something, establish something. The moment you try to prove or establish something, you need to have arguments, right? We already talked about arguments, but now when we talk about arguments, it's also very important to know what are the good arguments and bad arguments, true arguments and false arguments. Okay? Now, fallacies deal with bad arguments because you give arguments, but that argument is not really relevant. That's why some of these fallacies are called fallacies of relevance, because what you say is not particularly relevant to what you want to prove. So these are called fallacies of relevance. Now, usually in arguments, we use language. Problems arising from use of language, we discuss as fallacies of ambiguity. Today I am going to discuss that. But before that, we will have a re-look of what we did last week, because I feel that some of these things we did not discuss adequately. Because what comes as fallacies is very important for us to understand why they are called fallacies. Now, one point I tried to explain to you last week was, although fallacies are logically false, they have a psychological appeal. Like, although they are not convincing, they appear to be convincing. Right? When we say that something appeals to your emotions, psychological appeal to emotions, that is something very important for us to remember, because very often our conclusions and also our decisions in day-to-day life goes for emotions. One very mundane example is, have you seen these people who are accused for some kind of crime? When they go to court's hearing, usually, they wear very well. If men, with tie, coat and, all these things, and then if women also, they are wearing very nicely. Now, why is that? This person is considered to be a criminal. In the sense, he is charged with a criminal offense. But when he goes to court's hearing, he looks very decent in the sense, hair combed, the well-shaven face, and wearing very well. Those things, in a way, nothing to do with what you did. But why do you present yourself like that? Now, that can have impact on the judge's mind about this person. So external appearance makes an influence, but that has no logical value. However shabbily you dress, it doesn't make you less criminal or more criminal. But why do people wear so decently, wear so nicely when they go to courts as who have been charged with criminal charges? You are not still convicted, but of course, your case is being heard. The reason is, it has a psychological appeal. Whether you win the case or not, whether you are convicted or acquitted, depends on, the arguments. But in the judge's mind, it makes some kind of positive impression if you dress very well. And also, opposite side, if you are not dressed very well, then it makes a negative impression in the judge's mind. Or judge will interpret this as not taking the court very seriously, something like that. So you create negative emotions, and then as a result, your decision about you can be negative. So you see, in our day-to-day life, we are making use of this kind of things in order to impress people, in order to prove something. I mean, a lot of things you do that. Suppose I come to do a business deal with you, then I come in a good car, and these things. Maybe I borrowed the car, it is not my car, but why is that? Because I want to show that, I'm a rich person. Sometimes you are looking for a bank to put your money. Usually, these banks, if you look at the headquarters are huge buildings. Actually, the bank office does not need that much of a huge building. But by a huge building, what the bank wants to show you is, look, we are a valuable organization. So if you put our money, if something happens, we can even sell our building and give you money. We are so big. So, unconsciously you get that feeling. So bank, usually they have their headquarters in very big buildings. And the business people go and stay in very good hotels when they go to business deal. And then I go to another country and I want to do a business. I stay one of the best hotels and ask people to come and see me in the hotel. So, people get... Now, all these things, why we do? Impress people. It's a part of my argument. Argument is, if I'm going to do a business in a different country, that means I want you to accept me as a good businessman. But then, with these outside things, we try to make an impact. So, logic also, we need to know that there are a lot of psychological appeals. So, the fallacies can be psychologically appealing. That is why people go by fallacies. Okay? So, it is very important for us to understand this distinction of logical and psychological distinction. And then, out of the fallacies of relevance, we discussed argument from ignorance. The fallacy occurs when some statement is taken as true because it has not been proved false, or to take some statement as false because it has not been proved true. Now we say genetically, not genetically manufactured food is good because it has not been proved bad. Now I explained to you last week also, we eat quite a lot of genetically manufactured food, GMF. We don't know even. But actually genetically manufactured food, you can get more product, but by changing certain changes in the seed. But only thing is still science, it has not been established whether it is good for your health or bad. But from the point of view of the producer, it is much more profitable to produce genetically modified food because you can get larger output, with less effort, larger output. So why not? But then we are the people who eat it. So the producer makes a lot of money, but we are the people who eat it. Is it good for us, bad? Now the argument is that, well, it has not been proved bad yet. It has not been proved bad. So you eat it. But simply it is because of our ignorance. We don't know it. It has not been proved bad. So simply you accept something to be good because it has not been proved bad, or something to be bad because it has not been proved good. So these type of things. Now even that argument can be applicable to genetically modified food also. Like, you can take it as bad because it has not been proved good or something. Yeah, so it can go either way. But in either manner, argument from ignorance means argument from simply that fact it has not been proved. And also we said there is a very special case of argument from ignorance that comes in the legal discourse. Now in the law, if somebody is charged with some crime, until he is proved to be guilty, he is considered to be not guilty. Now this is a special case. So simply we say it has not been proved that he is guilty, so therefore you consider him to be not guilty. Now logically it has the same problem, but even though logically it has the same issue, the reason for this is if every time someone is charged with something, you take that person to be guilty, then it becomes problematic, because there can be some innocent people who are convicted as guilty, but they are innocent. So therefore, law goes to the other side. So till you are proved guilty, you are not considered to be guilty. But by that, there can be so many criminals going free. Because a criminal doing something, but you can't prove it. Then what? Criminal goes free. But the law considers that is even okay, rather than convicting an innocent person. Because a guilty person, a criminal going free, is not as serious as innocent person being convicted. So, the law considers that particular situation to be acceptable. So, if it has not been proved, you are not considered to be guilty. Now, that is in the modern law. But if you look at the Buddhist Vinaya, Buddhist Vinaya also has that. Buddhist Vinaya also has that. So, the person is not guilty. I remember, I think it comes in the Samantapasadika. Apatti dasanussaho nakatabbo kudachanang anapatti gavessami iti kairathamanasan. Like it says that you must not try to find someone is guilty. Anapatti gavessami. That you have in the mind that I must find this person innocent. Iti kairathamanasan. When you are a judge in the Buddhist Vinaya, have you heard this? This is apatti dasanussaho natkatabbo kudachanam anapatti gavessami iti kairathamanasan. Apatti dasanussaho nakatabbo kudachanam anapatti gavessami iti kairathamanasan. So, apatti dasanussaho kudachanam nakatabbo. You must never try to look for the violation. Anapatti kavessami iti kairata manasam. The judge has to make up his mind to think that I'm trying to find this person innocent. But of course, when you try to find this person innocent, if you cannot find him innocent, what you find is that person is guilty, that's fine. But you must not begin with thinking that I must find him guilty. So that whole attitude is wrong according to Buddhism. Because you must always have an attitude motivated by karuna, so that you try to find this person innocent. But failing that, you can't do anything. Okay, he is guilty, that should not be a problem. But your initial attitude has to be to find a person not guilty. Not the person guilty, but the person not guilty. So this the argument from ignorance in the law system has a special case in that, okay? And then appeal to inappropriate authority is not difficult. That means, again, this kind of fallacy you can see in commercial advertisements. They always have some very popular film star or very popular person, endorsing their thing. But the very popular persons endorsing, because very popular people are followed by others, accepted by others, that's why. But that doesn't guarantee that particular thing is good or bad, It has nothing to do with that. But commercial people spend so much money on advertisement, they know that is very effective. So because it has a psychological appeal. It has a psychological appeal, that's why. They are not fools. They spend millions of dollars sometime. I told you the other day about the Michael Jackson's story, so many millions. But Coca-Cola company is not fool. They know exactly what they are doing. So if you can get the Michael Jackson's endorsement, so many people start drinking Coca-Cola. So, like that. So, but these are logically fallacious, but psychologically appealing. And then we had complex question. That also is not hard to understand. The fallacy occurs when the truth of some other conclusion is assumed or hidden in the statement. Have you stopped smoking? So, that's a question. But that question has an assumption behind it. That's why it's called complex question. When I ask, have you stopped smoking? I say two things. I say, you are smoking. Or you smoke. Have you stopped it? So in one question, I make two statements. If I ask, do you smoke? That's one thing. But if I ask, have you stopped smoking? Then I indirectly say that you have been smoking or you are smoking. So that's a complex question. Now, because the question is complex, you cannot answer negatively or positively. Whether you answer negatively, whether you answer positively, you are in trouble. You admit that you smoke. If you say yes, then you smoke before, not now. No, that means you are still smoking. But if a person who has never smoked before, this question is problematic, because the question is a complex question. Very often, in the arguments, we assume this kind of things, and then we make a statement. So the moment you accept it, then you are in trouble. So, that is the complex question. And argument ad hominem. Ad hominem means against the man, against the person. Now that argument is also not difficult to understand, because rather than criticizing or commenting on the particular argument, you attack the person who is present in the argument. You attack the person. So ad hominem means against the person. So you don't go against the argument, you go against the person who is giving the argument. Now, again, two logically do not have anything to do with that. But psychologically, it is a very appealing thing. Because, we ordinary human beings, we like to criticize people, gossip about people. If somebody says some gossip about somebody, we like to hear. And then we like to also to make our judgments on those gossip. So, ad hominem argument means against the person, not against the argument. Now, this again is a very, in a way, in the Buddhist teaching you have this. Buddha says very clearly, not the person, but what the person does. So if you talking about apatti or violation, don't talk about the person, talk about what the person did. Because by doing one violation, you can't judge the person. Person may be a good person, may be doing a lot of good things. So Buddha says that, look at the person's action. So it is the similar thing here. Ad hominem argument is to go against the person, not against the argument. Now in science and knowledge, one thing we need to remember is when you take a knowledge claim, a statement, whether it is true or false does not depend on the source, where it comes from. It can be coming from a very great person, but that doesn't mean that it is going to be true. Okay? It may be coming from a very ordinary person, but again, that doesn't mean that it is false. So it is not the source. Not the source means not the source where it comes from. It must be the claim, that statement, whether a person who is saying is it a great person or not, it is not very material. You look at the thing that is said. If it is true, then you accept it. If it is false, then you reject it. Again, that the Buddhism has this attitude, isn't it? Not the person. There's a story about Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta. Now the story says that one day when Venerable Sariputta was walking, his robe was touching the ground. Who pointed out it? One small Samanera. But it doesn't really matter who pointed it out. Whether it is the Buddha pointed out to him, or whether very small, insignificant Samanera pointed out to him. But it was a fact that his robe was not properly well dressed. So the Venerable Sariputta's reaction was, he humbly accepted it, yes. Now this is the philosophy. So it doesn't really matter where it coming from. So in other words, the source of an idea is not, it is validation. If you say it in a more different manner. Source or the origin of an idea is not, it is validation. Where the idea comes from, that's also in a very Buddhistic, right? You can be getting very good ideas from the Bible. You can be getting very good ideas from the Quran. Or you can be getting very good ideas from any other thing. But if it is good, then it is good. Okay? So, in the Anguttara Nikaya, there is a very interesting statement. Have you heard this? Sabbang Subhasitang Buddha Vachanang Eva. What does it mean?
What the Buddha taught is the best.
Other way around. What is well said is the word of the Buddha. Subhasita means well said, good statement. So what is well said is the statement of the Buddha. What does it mean? Actually, well said things can be anywhere in the world. If it is well said, you take that to be a word of the Buddha. I mean, you can also say, as you said, what the Buddha said is well said. Of course, what the Buddha said is well said. That's true. We accept that it's to be like that. So, what the Buddha said is well said. But what this says is, Sabbang Subhasitam Buddha Vachanang Eva. Sabbang Buddha Vachanang Subhasitang Eva. No, it's not that. But Sabbang Subhasitang Buddha Vachanang Eva. All the well said things are. Now, all these things, in a way, we can connect it to this idea. So, the ad hominem arguments are wrong. Because it is not against the person. It is not really the person. Now, even in Buddhism, what the Buddha said is true, not because Buddha said this true. Buddha said it because it is true. Because it is good. Okay? Now, normally we say that, okay, we take it as good because Buddha said. Because we assume that Buddha says everything is good. Okay, that's no problem. But argument has to be, we accept to be good what the Buddha said, not because Buddha says, but because it is good. What does Buddha say in the Kalama Sutta? Manussavena and all that, finally he says, don't accept because I say, but you check whether it is good or bad, then you accept it. Yeah? So, in the Buddhist tradition, you can see that ad hominem argument, fallacy occurs when instead relevant fact the person who is. So now in Buddhism, we really are careful about this. We don't really, of course, we take what the Buddha said, that's true. But the rationale is that we take what the Buddha said because it is a good thing. But to our knowledge, Buddha has not said anything bad. That's a different thing. But, so ad hominem argument is a type of interesting thing we can see. Then we have accident and converse accident. This is about generalizations. You have generalization applicable to individual things, and then you have converse accident applying individual things for generalizations. In other words, you have to really see it very carefully. This fallacy occurs when the generalizations are applied carelessly to particular situations. Like, you have a broader generalization, but generalizations may not be true of each and individual thing. But it could be true for larger majority of the people. Okay? Now, generalizations usually come like that. If something is true for larger majority of people, we take it as generalization. But of course, that doesn't mean that the generalization is applicable to each and every person. We say that all Burmese are non-veg. Is that true? But there can be occasionally vegetarians also, right? So, But as a generalization, we say all Burmese are non-veg or something. But there can be vegetarians. So, so generalizations, we go by certain common factors to many people, larger group of people. However, we need to be careful when a generalization is applying to each and individual person, then that is different. So also the other way around. When you say a particular thing, you apply it to the general. As I said the other day, you come to say this country and somebody steal your money. Then you say that all Burmese are stealers or something. Then what happened to you, one person, you generalize to the entire community, something like that. So either way, generalizations have to be applied carefully. On the one hand, it is very difficult to live without generalizations. You need to have some general knowledge. Particularly when you look at the tourist guides, the book about a country, you get so many generalizations. Okay, whether it's like this, people are like this, they dress like this, and all sorts of things. But those are generalizations. In order to get some rough idea, it is very good for you to know those things. But there is no guarantee that each particular situation, to each particular situation, you can apply these things. So accident and converse accident are two important things, where you get this with generalization. And false cause. This fallacy, when non-cause is taken as the cause of a particular situation. For example, when something happens after another, that another is taken as the cause of what happened later. Now, this is something like if you take time sequence, something happens before and then something happens after. Then you think that what happens before is the cause of what happened after. But it may be so or it may not be so. There are, the situations, things always happen one after the other. But that doesn't mean that, there is a causal relationship between the two. For example, maybe a train passes from your house 7 o'clock. So you leave after that. But is there a causal connection between a train passing your house and then you are leaving after that? There's no causal connection actually. It so happens, one happens after the other. And there is philosophically, there is a very interesting thing, particularly in the Western philosophy, it comes with David Hume. Causality is usually understood to be A causing B. So you first see A, then you see B. So therefore you think that A is the cause of B. But it has been like that. But then David Hume asked, how can you be sure about it, that it will happen all the time? Because always we look at something in the past and then we project it to the future. So that is one way of looking at it. Simply because something happens one after the other. In some cases it may be the cause, in other cases it may not be the cause. So to conclude that it is A is the cause of B may not be correct, simply because one happens after the other. Now, it is very important when you look at the causality to know the correct causal relationship between things. When you look at this phenomenon as a broader phenomenon, in causality we talk about Sometimes we talk about necessary conditions. We talk about sufficient condition. Now, in order for something to happen, you need these two types of conditions. Now, conditions, in Buddhist philosophy, paccaya, you talk about the paccayas in the patthana and all that. Now, necessary conditions means there can be more than one conditions that are necessary for something to happen. Now, these are called necessary conditions. Now, if you take any particular phenomena, now Buddha says, Chakku Vijnana, Chakkuncha, Paticca, Rupecha, Upajjati Chakku Vijnana. Now, Chakku Vijnana occurs when you have Chakku and also when there is a Rupa. So, in order to have Chakku Vijnana, what are the conditions that are necessary? You have to have a Chakku, there must be Rupa. So, if you have only a Chakku, there is no Rupa, then Chakku Vijnana cannot happen, right? And if you have Rupa, no Chakku, again Chakku Vijnana cannot happen. So the necessary conditions means there is a set of conditions that are necessary for something to happen. So there is always a minimum amount of conditions. When these things come together, you can say that that particular thing happens, okay? Now, for example, if you look at vehicle running. Now, in order for vehicle to run, you can list all the things that you need. For vehicle to run, it must have wheels, right? Without wheels, vehicle not run. Of course, it has to have an engine. Engine must have fuel, right? So we can list these things. Now, a vehicle will not run only if it has wheels. Vehicle will not run only if it has gasoline. Okay, like that. And also we can say vehicle needs a driver. So, but only if the driver is there, vehicle will not run. So the necessary condition means there are certain conditions that are necessary in order for something to happen. So in the absence of even one necessary condition, that thing will not happen. Suppose you have a vehicle with a driver, with 4 or 3 or 2 or wheels, everything, but it doesn't have gasoline. So the one necessary condition is not there, so it will not happen. So the definition of the necessary condition is without any one necessary condition, that particular thing will not happen. So that is necessary condition. In order for something to happen, there can be number of necessary conditions. Okay? So the causal relation, when you analyze it, you can see that there can be many conditions that are necessary for something to happen. So this is necessary condition. And then sufficient condition is usually used in singular. Sufficient condition is coming together of the minimum amount of necessary condition. So when there is the sufficient condition, that thing has to happen. Okay? So necessary condition is in the absence of which a thing will not happen. Sufficient condition is in the presence of which the thing has to happen. Is that clear? I mean, like, you need both necessary conditions and sufficient condition. Necessary means without which, if you don't have at least even one necessary condition, that will not happen. If you need 5 conditions for vehicle to run, you have to have all 5 conditions for the vehicle to run. Even one minus, it will not happen. Sufficient condition means the coming together or the collection of all the necessary conditions. Now, that is what is called sufficient condition. So when the sufficient condition is there for something to happen, that thing has to happen. If the driver is there, gasoline is there, wheel is there, engine is there, then car could run. No other car doesn't, there can be other things maybe needed or not needed. But if at least those things are there, then car should come. So we can say that necessary conditions and sufficient condition. Now this false cause is something interesting when you look at the idea of false cause. What is that? Did I do something? maybe a small earthquake or something. The fallacy when the non-cause is taken as the cause of a particular situation. For example, when something happens after other, that another is taken as the cause of what happened later. So it is very necessary for us to understand this concept of necessary and sufficient condition, so that we may not be misled in understanding causes and conditions that are necessary for something. Okay? So false cause is always to attribute some non-cause for something. Actually it has no causal connection. Sometimes in day-to-day life we see a lot of many things like that. I gave you a popular example, like okay, you take this girl from the village and you send her to the town. And then something happens very bad to her, and then you say that sending that girl from village to the town is the bad thing. But it doesn't have a causal relation, So, things like that. And you get knocked by a car because you are traveling on the road. Then you say that, because you should not travel on the road. That's because you traveled on the road. Of course, in a way it is true, but it's not the cause, right? It's true that if you are inside your room, you will not get knocked by a car. But on the other hand, like simply because you are walking on the road, you are knocked by a car. So the walking on the road is not the cause. So you have to really have now this why. But very often people get convinced by that kind of thing. Yeah, that's why I have told her to never go out of the house. You can say that. So the fact that you went out of the house is the problem. But no. So, like that, to understand in the proper cause is, something very important. So, the false cause is not to understand the right cause. And the next one, begin the question. I think one of the very, very important logical, the fallacies we come across. The fallacy occurs when the truth of what is to be proved is assumed beforehand, or when the conclusion is stated in the premises in other words. Now, although when you say this like this, it looks pretty simple, but begin the question can happen in many different ways. Now, very often, we don't try to prove certain things, we assume. Or then the same thing is called circular argument. Circular argument means you argue in the circle. Like in the Western philosophy, there is an argument to prove the existence of God. It has been used for hundreds of years by philosophers without knowing that it was a circular argument. You try to prove the existence of God by definition. First you say God is a perfect person. Perfect person has existence. Then you say therefore God exists. But what you have done is really, you define the perfectness to include existence, and then you say the God exists. So actually it is a begin the question. Here the question doesn't mean question. Here question means the conclusion or the most important thing. So begin the question means you beg or you assume, you already take it for granted, the conclusion. Now, a conclusion in an argument is to prove. You want to have reasons to prove it. But here what has happened is you already assume the truthfulness of that. That's what it is. And then also we saw that in a deductive argument, usually in deductive arguments, in a way this begin the question you can see. But then in a deductive argument that we don't take it as a logical fallacy. Because in a proper deductive argument, you have the conclusion contained. Now if you say all human beings are mortal, Socrates is human, you know the conclusion, right? Because conclusion is indirectly contained in your premises. But that's a deductive argument. So in a way, in a deductive argument, we don't consider this as a fallacy. Because, if you take mathematics, same thing. Now in the mathematics, when you go to examination, you get this, the sum. And then if you work it out, you can get the answer. That means that answer was inside those premises, right? So the simple thing, if you look at something like this, you say 2 plus 2. When you say this, you know the answer. How do you know the answer? Because if this is a premise, then in these two premises, you can see that the conclusion is contained. But this is not considered to be begin the question, although it has that. But because mathematics help us to understand very complex things through symbols. So it serves a different purpose. But begin the question means, therefore, not this type of thing, but begin the question means in a more academic, logical, philosophical discussions, if you assume, something to be the case. Like we had example, we can't be famous because we are not well known. Now, famous and well known are both the same. So, in other words, you are saying your same statement in a different language. And we can say that he is unmarried, therefore he is a bachelor. Same thing, right? He is unmarried because he is unmarried. Then only you see that it is a meaningless argument. But when you say he is unmarried because he is a bachelor, then of course you use two different words. You think that there is something. But when you translate into other language, he is unmarried because he is unmarried, then you say, that argument is, not real. So begin the question is very important logical thing. And then appeal to emotions, pity and force, all these are, interesting things. Rather than the giving proper arguments, you appeal to emotions. Like again in the advertisements, you can see that. Commercial advertisements, sometimes patriotism. Okay, if you are a good Myanmar person, buy what is produced in Myanmar. So then people can be motivated to buy what is produced in Myanmar. But maybe what is produced in Myanmar is not very good. You would rather buy something better which is not produced in Myanmar. But simply the vendor uses your patriotism. Okay, you are a patriotic Myanmar person, then buy what you are producing. The two arguments, the argument has a psychological appeal, very popular. The other day I said that in India I have seen be Indian, buy Indian. Buy means B-U-Y Indian. So B-U-Y, buy. So in order to be Indian, you buy what is produced in India, like that. In many countries you have this, your patriotism, love for the nation, and also love for the religion. These things are used in order to motivate you to action. When you say be Indian, buy Indian, the person wants to convince you that you should buy this. But what is the reason you should buy it? Because you are Indian. That is not a very good reason. But many people can be motivated by that. So the false reasons are very, very powerful. That's why, this appeal to emotions. Now, appeal to emotions can be sympathy, suffering, and, all kinds of things. Or by force, lot of things. So in order to convince somebody of an argument, you use your force of your position, whatever. So all these things are not really rational things. Like, at home, your father will say something, okay, do it. Otherwise, I will trash you. Now that is force. But, same father can say, do it. because you can give some reasons. But then very often, we don't care to give reasons, do it. And because you have the authority as the father. So the child has to do that. So that is force. And your mother will ask you to do something you don't do, then she will start crying. Then you do it. So that is pity. That works. When the mother starts crying, you do it. So that works. Same thing, you ask some extra money from your father, he says no, then you start crying. Then again, it works. So, like that, you are using emotions in order for for you to convince somebody to do something. So, that again is, used in society quite. And then irrelevant conclusion, number 12, is missing the point. The fallacy occurs when a wrong conclusion is drawn from given premises. Your premises can be true, but of course, you are drawing the wrong conclusion. Premises are true. There is this joke, in some time, okay, you drink whiskey with water. You drink scotch with water. You drink brandy with water. And like that. So what is the common factor? You get drunk. Common factor, all these things is water. So don't drink water, you get drunk. So, like that. That is irrelevant conclusion because, the conclusion you draw is not really the right conclusion. But, your premises are true. So, even when the premises are true, if your conclusion is false, then, you can be drawing the wrong conclusion. Now, these are basically the fallacies of relevance. There can be many other similar things, but basically the other day we looked at some exercises. Today also we will look at some exercises. But before doing that, maybe we will take a short 5 minutes break and then we will come. Okay. Some of these exercises after we discussed all fallacies. Now, next I would like to move into the fallacies of ambiguity. Now, so far we discussed fallacies of relevance. Fallacies of ambiguity are basically connected to language. In an argument we use language, right? Without language you can't have argument. But, sometimes fallacies occur because we use the wrong language. Number one is equivocation. Equivocation. When a word used in the argument has several meanings, this fallacy can occur. Example is, she is a good girl. Now the problem is, good for what? What do you mean by good? So equivocation. Actually, this equivocation is a very important thing in language because in the natural language, you get always different meanings. One word has more than one meaning. That's why, the fallacies of ambiguity are discussed in arguments because we use language and then the natural language has more than one meaning. Now, how do you know whether the word is used in a particular context? Now, if you don't know the particular context and the particular meaning, then of course the argument can be fallacious. And some words have so many meanings. Now, for example, like good. When you say good, we say she is a good person. It is not very clear. Good in what sense? Good to do something, good to walk with, good to talk with, or, in what sense? Or do we really mean by some kind of ethical goodness of the person? We don't know. So, you need to be clear in your language. Now, this is precisely the reason why, the logic has gone into what is called symbolic logic. Now, in the symbols, you have P, Q, R, S, and, So instead of a particular sentence, we have P. So when you say P implies Q, it means really two sentences. But on behalf of a sentence, we have just P or Q. And sometimes in mathematics, we have X, Y, and so on. Again, we are using symbols so that rather than using natural language, which has so many meanings, you are using symbols, because symbols can have, the one meaning. Basically, you can restrict the meaning of symbols. So in that sense, you can say symbolic logic is a result of this equivocation. Even mathematics, you go to numbers. Again, numbers, you abstract certain things. But number is kind of symbol, but, much more complex thing, number. Because numbers have been, being matter of speculation for philosophers for a long time, if you look at the philosophy of mathematics. But numbers are also some kind of symbols. But basically, equivocation is, when you use language in order to on purpose, you can use language. Look at page 113. This is Alice in the looking through the looking glass. Who did you pass on the road? The king went on, holding his hand out to the messenger for some hay. Nobody, said the messenger. Quite right, said the king. This young lady saw him too. So, of course, nobody walks slower than you. Now, what is it? Nobody. But in nobody has two meanings. Nobody can be used to refer to some particular person, or nobody could be used to say none. Two meanings. It's like saying, what did you eat? I can say, I ate nothing. That means, I ate nothing? Or what? I mean, in English we say, I ate nothing. But somebody could misunderstand, I ate something called nothing. Like that. But, it depends on each language. I don't know Myanmar language, but, in the Myanmar language, you can see that there can be, certain terms, certain words that has more than one meaning. Now, when you are using more than one meaning, then there is, this Then we have number 2, amphiboly. Amphiboly means fallacy of amphiboly occurs when a statement used as a premise is ambiguous due to its grammatical structure. Example, the farmer blew out his brains after taking affectionate farewell of his family with a shotgun. Now the question is, he blew out his brains. Blew out his brains means, you shoot your head. But then, after taking affectionate farewell with a shotgun. So, did you take the farewell with the shotgun, or did you shoot yourself with the shotgun? Because, the structure where you have with the shotgun, the location is problematic, right? We would have had something like the farmer blew out his brains with the shotgun after taking affectionate farewell of his family. So in English language, where you put that word causes problem. So amphiboly is ambiguity because of the grammatical structure. Equivocation is, the difference is equivocation is the ambiguity because of the several meanings of one word. But amphiboly is different. It is a grammatical structure. Look at again, there is another example, 115. Leaking badly, manned by the skeleton crew, one infirmity after another overtakes the little ship. What does it mean? Leaking badly, manned by a skeleton crew, one infirmity after another overtakes the little ship. Actually, the connection is when you say leaking badly, it is not very clear what is leaking badly. Now, leaking badly must be the ship. So, usually in the English language, your adjectival phrase must be very close to the thing you are describing, right? So, leaking badly, the little ship, one, the one infirmity after another overtook the little ship. So the ship was the one thing that is leaking badly, not anything else. So, you have to have, so with the grammatical structure. I have heard this story about during some kind of Second World War time is something, This is what he wrote, kill him, not let him go. But however, if you have comma here, kill him not, let him go, then what happens? Yeah. You can have kill him, not let him go, kill him not, let him go. So with one comma, the whole difference between life and death, so something like that. Now here, it is simply a style or grammar, simply where are you going to put the, the comma. So ambivalence is that, simply because of the grammatical structure of something. Accent is argument may prove deceptive and invalid when the shift of meaning within it arises in changes emphasis given. We must not speak ills of our friends. We must not speak ills of our friends. Also you can have, we must not speak ills of our friends. Like you can have 3 or any number of things. But what it means is, it depends on where you put the emphasis. Now in the first sentence it says, we must not speak ills of our friends. When you give emphasis to our, what does it indirectly say? Yeah, we should not speak the ills of our friends, but we can speak ills of other people's friends. So, the meaning completely changes. The second one says, we must not speak ills of our friends. It says that we must speak goods of our friends, not the ills of our friends, you see. And then also we can have something like, we must not speak ills of our friends. We must not speak. So you can also have emphasis. So accent is where you put the emphasis. Actually in writing and speaking, there is a distinct difference here. Because when you speak, you can emphasize. We must not speak ills of our friends. So we can, but when you write, you have to use either bold or italics or bigger font, or there can be various ways of doing that, So then accent is because of that. We should not speak ills of our friends. Next page we have example, woman without her man would be lost. Would be perfectly acceptable to either sex. But to infer the statement with one accent from the statement accented differently would be an instance of woman without her man would be lost. Woman without her man would be lost. So, it depends on again where you put the emphasis. Or you can put emphasis on woman, woman without her man. But man is again different from it. Then we have accent. There are also something about the small print in page 117. Like, again, put the accent. Now, if you look at the advertisements or the goods you buy, there is something in bigger, but then there are some small letters. Actually, the most important things are in small letters. You can't even read that. But for the legal purpose, they can say, no, we printed, it is there. So, they can get released from the court case. But, so the small print is, again a problem because, it is some type of accent. In the sense you underplay the importance by putting it as small. But then it could be very important. So, things like that you get in social life. Look at the very last paragraph. Even the literal truth can be used by manipulating displacement to deceive the accent. Disgusted with his first mate, who was repeatedly inebriated on duty, the captain of a ship noted in his ship's logbook almost every day that the man was drunk today. So, the captain was so upset about his deputy because he is drunk every day. So, he wrote, the mate was drunk today. Okay. Angry mate took his revenge, keeping the log himself on a day the captain was ill. The mate recorded, the captain was sober today. That means captain was not drunk today, which means that captain was drunk in all the other days. So something like that. So the accent is that when you say captain was sober today, sober means not drunk, which indicates that he was drunk in all the other days, But it's true that captain was sober today, but it was equally true he was sober yesterday, he was sober tomorrow, will be tomorrow, and he was sober always. But rather than saying that, when you say captain was sober today, you are giving a completely different type of interpretation. And then number 4 and 5, composition and division. This again very important. You remember in the fallacies of relevance, we had a similar thing. In here, composition and division is, you take the attribute of particular thing and you attribute it to the totality. Now here the distinction is composition and division go for parts to whole and whole to parts. Earlier we had a fallacy from generalization to particular and particular to generalization. Now this is one thing, and here we have whole to parts and parts to the whole. So composition is from the attributes of the parts of a whole to the attributes of the whole itself. A particularly flagrant example would be that since every part of a certain machine is light in weight, the machine as a whole is in light weight. Now here composition is you go from parts to the whole, attribute of the parts to the whole. So this is what's called composition. And then this is division. Now for example, you take the whole and parts. You take a huge engine. If you take each individual part, those parts are light. But that doesn't mean that the engine is light or less weight. Because if you put all the less weight parts together, it becomes heavy. So here, what happens is attributes of the parts of a whole to the attributes of the whole itself. So because all parts are light, individually, you take that the whole comprising the part is also the same. But it could not be same because when you put all the light parts together, it could be weight. There can be other instances, like if you take all the parts of this machine are white, therefore the whole thing is white. You can say that, right? So it works for certain things, but it doesn't work for certain other things, right? So it depends on, you have to be careful to which it works and to which it not works. So earlier we had a generalization to particulars and particulars to generalization. You get a generalization and you attribute to particulars. You get a particular characteristic applied to the whole group of people. So that is in the fallacies of relevance. But this is also somewhat similar, but if you look at carefully, it is not really similar. Now the second one is division. The fallacy of division is simply the reverse of the fallacy of composition. In it, the same confusion is present, but the inference proceeds in the opposite. As in the case of composition, two varieties of fallacy of division may be distinguished. Okay, let's look at an example. The parts of this engine are heavy because the engine is heavy. Now, because engine is heavy, we say that the parts of the engine are heavy. Because we attribute the characteristic of the whole to the parts. But then that may be wrong. Although engine is heavy, if you take individual parts, those parts can be not. Look at page 119. Now, if you look at the first argument, dogs are carnivorous. Afghan hounds are dogs. Therefore, Afghan hounds are carnivorous. Now, that is a perfectly valid, good argument, okay? Right? Do you see that? The first premise is dogs are carnivorous. Second premise is Afghan hounds are dogs. Therefore, you can say Afghan hounds are carnivorous. Now, look at the next argument. Dogs are frequently encountered in this street. Afghan hounds are dogs. Therefore, Afghan hounds are frequently encountered in the street. Now, is that the valid argument? It is not a valid argument, although two premises are true. Now, that is the interesting thing. Premises are true. Dogs are frequently encountered in this street, true. Afghan hounds are dogs, also it is true. But of course, you can't conclude that therefore Afghan hounds are frequently encountered in the street. You can't say that. Invalid. Now look at the next argument. Humans are mortal, Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. Well, look at the next argument. American Indians are disappearing. That man is an American Indian, therefore that man is disappearing. So what is the fallacy there actually? Fallacy is division, right? Because you attribute some attribute or quality of the whole to an individual person. So as a whole, American Indians are disappearing, right? But of course, you can't say that this particular person is disappearing because he is not disappearing. So you can't have that characteristic attributed to it, okay? So I think we are done with the fallacies. So basically we had two types of fallacies. One type of fallacy is fallacies of relevance, where you have relevant premises, but of course conclusion doesn't follow from this. The second is more like fallacies of ambiguity. That means the wrong use of language, problematic use of language, or doubtful use of language. As a result of that, arguments become fallacious. Okay. We will look at some examples and try to understand some of these arguments. Page 113, 113. 113. There you can see number 18. When you spend the money you yourself have worked to earn, you are likely to exercise some care in how you spend it. You know that it will take lots of work to replace what you spend. Now, you know, in that statement there is a conclusion and there is a premise. Conclusion I would consider to be the first long sentence. When you spend the money you yourself have worked to earn, you are likely to exercise some care in how you spend it. Because it's not there, but you know that it will take lots of work to replace what you spend. Now if you look at carefully, what do you think that fallacy is? Of course it has a lot of words. Simply it says when you spend money you earn, you have become more cautious. Why? Because you know that it will take a lot of work to replace what you spend. It will take a lot of energy for you to replace what you spend. That means to earn what you spend. Actually, if you look at carefully, you look at it, both premise and the conclusion seem to be saying the same thing. You will be careful spending hard-earned money because you know that replacing hard-earned money will be difficult. So in the way you are saying that the same thing, both conclusion and premise, saying that, you know, money is earned with a lot of difficulty. So you spend money, you will be careful in spending money earned with difficulty because you have to work very hard in order to earn that money. So in a way you can see that no new reason. You spend money you earn with lot of effort. You know, you be careful in spending money you earn with lot of effort because you know that you earn money with lot of effort. You know, something like that. When you say it, reword it, you can see it is the same. Look at number 20. There is no such thing as knowledge which cannot be carried into practice. For such knowledge is really no knowledge at all. There is no such knowledge as knowledge which cannot be carried into practice. Because such knowledge is really no knowledge. But what is the such knowledge? When you answer such knowledge refers to the first sentence, right? So the conclusion is there is no such a thing as knowledge which cannot be carried into practice. Because the reason is such knowledge. Such knowledge means the knowledge which cannot be carried into practice, not really knowledge at all. Now again you can see that you assume the same thing. There you can see that begin the question. So you look at these examples of begin the question, you can see that language doesn't make it very clear. But if you think carefully, you can see that both premise and the conclusion seem to be saying the same. We will try to, if you look at that sentence carefully, if you rephrase it, put it in a different language, you will see what is the problem. There is no such thing as knowledge which cannot be put into. There is no knowledge that cannot be put into practice. Now this is, I would say, conclusion. This is premise. Now if you look at your conclusion, there is no knowledge that cannot be put into practice. Premise means the reason. What is the reason? Knowledge that cannot be put into practice is not knowledge. Don't you see that both are the same? Number one says, this is, I put simpler language. There is no knowledge that cannot be put into practice. In other words, you can say, knowledge that cannot be put into practice is not knowledge. Okay? Then, same thing you say. So the number one statement you can restate saying, knowledge that cannot be put into practice is not knowledge. Then the premise saying the same thing. So actually I would have put it that way, then it is clearer. But then, you can see that. Now you can see this begin the question thing is in a way not very easy. Because it is covered with a lot of words. But if you really unpack it and reconstruct it, then you can see that it is not really a good argument. Because what you have said is the same thing. Impractical knowledge is not knowledge because impractical knowledge is not knowledge. But if you say that, then of course it becomes ridiculous. But if you say it differently, then it is different. So it is like that. We will look at some exercises in page 120. Actually 120 there is only one exercise, but we will look at that That's basically related to fallacies of ambiguity. Robert Toombs is reputed to have said, just before the Civil War, we could lick those Yankees with corn stalks. When he was asked after the war what had gone wrong, he is reputed to have said, it is very simple. Those damn Yankees refused to fight with corn stalks. Now you see, if you look at carefully, that fallacy depends on you have used the same word corn stalks in two different meanings. In the first sense, corn stalk means not really a corn stalks, something very unimportant. But in the second instance, corn stalk means really the corn stalks. Corn stalks are, like sweet corn stalks. So you can see the same word has been used in two different senses. I will give you another example. Have you heard about Oscar Wilde? Who is Oscar Wilde? Oscar Wilde is a great literary figure in England. So one time he has said that, he has said like this, I can pun over any subject. This is what he said. Pun over. Pun means you turn the word other way around. You make pun of mean that you turn the meaning of the word other way around. That. So he had said in a company of friends, I can pun over any subject. Okay. Then somebody said, okay, pun over, say, Queen Elizabeth. Pun over Queen Elizabeth. Then Oscar Wilde's answer was, she is not a subject. What is the equivocation? Equivocation is using one word in two different sentences. What is it? Now first he said, I can pun over any subject. Now their subject means what? Any topic, any theme. But in the second thing, when he says, she is not a subject, what does the subject means? Subject means, in a kingdom, king and all the other people are subjects. Subjects means those who live under the king or under the queen are called subjects. So here you see two different meaning of subject. One is a subject means any subject, anything, any topic, any theme. But the second thing, when he said, right away he has said, she is not a subject. No. But of course that being, although it is a fallacy, but it's being very witty, Like in a friend's conversation, you are so clever. You just turn the meaning other way around. Because in England, usually, people respect the royal family so much. So you don't want to pun over Queen Elizabeth, right? So then, right away, but, because he is not, without getting into an embarrassing situation, he just turned the meaning. Now, of course, that is his cleverness. But, you are using one word in two different senses, right? So in a way, it is to show that you are such a clever person. But on the other hand, logically, there is a fallacy. Because you have used the same word in two different senses. So it's like that. Turn the next page. Number 8. You are a bad journalist because you are a bad woman. What is the fallacy there? What is it? Say it loud. Bad. When you say bad person and bad journalist and bad woman, does it mean the same thing? You say to somebody bad journalist, but does that mean the same thing, bad woman? When you say bad woman means, usually in the society you say bad woman, the woman who is loose morals. But when you say bad journalist, it means something different. And also, if you look at it as an argument from fallacy of relevance, there is also a fallacy of relevance there. What is the fallacy of relevance? Against the ad hominem argument, right? It is against the person. It's ad hominem argument. So number 8 can be both. Now look at number 6. Each person's happiness is a good to that person, and general happiness therefore a good to the aggregate of all persons. Now what is the fallacy there? Yeah, it is division, because you attribute in the something common to the totality into a particular person. Each person's happiness is a good to that person. So do you see that? Because you are attributing the quality of the totality into a part. Look at the similar thing, number 10. Universe is spherical. Spherical means round. Because all the constituent parts of the universe, that is the sun, moon, and the planets, appear in this form. Now what is the argument? What kind of fallacy is there? What do you think? Pardon me? Composition. Yeah. Because you take the shape of the individual things and you attribute it to the universe, right? Because you don't know what the shape of the universe, but you take the sun, moon and other things, all are spherical. Because all are spherical, you conclude that universe itself is spherical. But then you don't know what the universe look like, or simply because you take the parts of the universe and then you try to conclude that universe is spherical. So again, you can see that look at again the bottom of that page, number 1. Seeing that eye and hand and foot and every one of our members have some obvious function, must not believe that in like manner a human being has a function over and above these particular functions. What is the fallacy there? Isn't it the same fallacy in number 10? Yeah? Yeah, it is in the same fallacy. Because the whole argument of Aristotle is, if our hand, foot and all these things have a function, then human being also must have a function. But of course that's a fallacy. Simply because hand, foot and things individually have a function, that doesn't mean that, Now you see, look at these, the fallacies carefully, how we usually think, Sometimes in day-to-day society we do that. We say, okay, mother is bad, so daughter is also bad. Children are also bad. What does it mean? It's a fallacy. Because mother bad, but does it mean that children are bad? No. Father bad, children are bad. But people do that, right? Very often in society. And those are very powerful arguments. So you see, actually we are in our day-to-day life, we are using a lot of fallacious arguments, okay? So, Look at number 5, page 122. I have looked everywhere in this area for an instruction book on how to play the concertina without success. What is the fallacy there? What is the fallacy? Ambiguity, equivocation, amphiboly. What is the fallacy? What is the argument, fallacy, when we don't have a properly structured sentence due to the structure of the sentence? Now, if you look at carefully, I have looked everywhere in this area for an instruction book on how to play concertina without success. Now, what is the problem with that sentence? Look at it, think. Have you been looking for an instruction book to play, how to play without success, or you have been looking for without success for a book? Yeah, without success. So the problem is where the without success has been located is a problematic, right? Because it looks like he wanted to have an instruction book to know how to play concertina without success. But what he says is he could not find a book how to play, so without success is not to the instruction book. Without success means he has been looking without success. That means he could not look. He could not find. Do you see that? Yeah. Yeah. It is amphiboly. As a fallacy, it is amphiboly. Look at number 12. Zukin said, gentleman is judged wise by single word he utters. Equally, he is judged foolish by a single word he utters. That is why one really must be careful of what one says. What is the fallacy there? Of course, it is true. What the Confucius says is true. But it is not the Confucius' fault. But Confucius, what society does. What society does is, if you say one wrong word, your all words are wrong. If you say one right word, your all words are right. So which means that you attribute the characteristic of one to your all other things. Right? You attribute characteristic of one word to all other words of yours. Then that means again composition, right? But actually, don't find fault with Confucius. What Confucius says is this. He says this is what society does. If you make one false move, it happens like, today in many places, like suppose, a person like President of United States. His behavior can be very well. But, in one moment, if you get caught, he is yawning by open mouth, and if it publishes in the newspapers, what happens to him? But there's only one instance newspaper people caught that he opened his mouth. But the whole thing is his entire life will be made miserable because of only one. But that doesn't mean that he's yawning all the time like that, right? So society is like that. Society has a lot of fallacious arguments, really. So it is. All kinds of things. Even look at the next one. Improbable events happen almost every day. But what happens almost every day is very improbable. Therefore, improbable events are very probable events. Then again, what happens one day, what happens every day, again like, attributing characteristic of one thing to characteristic of everything. Look at the number 15. All phenomena in the universe, next page 1, 2, 3, in the universe are saturated with moral values, and therefore we can come to assert that the universe for the Chinese is a moral universe. So your premise is all phenomena in the universe are saturated with moral values. Your conclusion is therefore universe for the Chinese is a moral universe. Again, I think it is the other way, you attribute the whole to the individual one, right? Is it composite? Yeah, okay. So, like that. Okay, I think we can go on, but I think that's enough for the day. What we discuss it really basically the fallacies is something very important for you to understand, because whenever we write, whenever we think, we can identify when people make wrong attributes, because in day-to-day life we use quite a lot of this kind of thing, but we need to see that that is not right. That is not right. So correct way of understanding. And the other thing is proper use of language, proper use of grammatical structure, where you put the adjectives. You are looking for instruction book to play without success, or you are looking for an instruction book without success to play piano, whatever, So it depends on where you put it. Okay. We will wind up. And then next session on research methodology, I will discuss how to write a research proposal, okay? So, because all of you are interested in research proposal, we will discuss a little bit at length how to write a good research proposal, and so that will be my next topic for this, okay? So, we will wind up for today, but do you have any questions or anything about this?